Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I think you should ask for VP Pence's conversation because he had a couple of conversations also. I could save you a lot of time. They were all perfect.
Donald Trump had publicly roped Mike Pence into this Ukraine scandal. Tonight, the Washington Post with a blockbuster reporting Trump involved Pence in these efforts to pressure Ukraine, and Pence's aides saying he was unaware they had anything to do with dirt on Biden's. I'm joined now by federal prosecutor John Flannery, who I should mention assisted Democrats during the impeachment of Bill Clinton. A lot of experience here. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
I want to get to several things with you, starting with the breaking news. What does it tell you that the Washington Post is reporting this out tonight?
What it tells us is that the corruption in the West Wing extends from the president perhaps to the vice president. The denial we get from everybody is discouraging and can't be given much weight. And how could you not know, doing the things he was doing, that he didn't know what it was about? He quite understood, and there were conversations apparently in the White House, and I assume he's sitting in some corner of the room in some of those meetings, and they're talking about why they want Zelensky to help them out with the presidential election the next year. And, you know, Pence can't claim to be disinterested. He wanted to be the vice president again.
Yeah, you lay it out, and that's big. And it comes as we're seeing what, by my estimation, as just one student of the current era, is a much faster, accelerated timetable for people to start turning in public. Off the top of my head, John, the Attorney General is now suddenly angry about all this. Mike Pence is suddenly out of the loop about all this. Rick Perry is suddenly cooperating with Congress. He will cooperate, he says, on the impeachment probe, unlike others. Rudy Giuliani obviously has been Rudy Giulianiing to save time. I'll leave it at that. You take it together, and what took in the Mueller probe months and sometimes over a year, by my count, in 2 weeks, we're seeing people go a lot of different directions. My question to you as an experienced congressional investigator, why?
What I think we're having is the rats are leaving the ship. And you overlook Pompeo, who's...
now you and Donald Trump are both calling people rats.
Well, there were mice in the press room at the White House. Even they were smart enough to get out of the way.
Solid reference for folks who didn't hear there was a mouse who apparently dropped. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Well, what I think you see is that they're beginning to see that this is different than any other earlier disclosure. You have the president saying, don't worry what it says, but what it basically says is, you know, notwithstanding what some say, there is a quid pro quo. I'm holding back $491 million that you need for your defense against Russia. But I have a precondition before we're going to give it to you so you can buy the javelins you need. And what that condition is I want you to open an investigation on my presidential opponent in the next election. So how can anybody deny they know about that? And the interesting thing about the state IG today that I thought was fascinating was he comes up and everybody's saying, what is he doing? One of the requirements in the subpoena to Rudy Giuliani is what information do you have on Yovanovitch, whom he made a campaign to get rid of to clear the way for him to do what he wanted to do with the incoming president of Ukraine.
You're talking about the people over there that they wanted to go after Biden.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, let me ask you as we broaden out, because we came on the air tonight before the Pence story broke, speaking to a member of Congress who told us solemnly, Jan Schakowsky, that she knows Adam Schiff has been facing death threats, that they view it as caused by President Trump. Adam Schiff talked about inciting violence. Speaker Pelosi says we are facing a threat to the Constitution. And the wider context is whether the President of the United States is abusing his office to criminally target rivals, something we have seen in other countries, in Ukraine, among other places, in Russia, which Putin does. Yes. We've had dissidents from Russia on this show who did hard time because they dared run against Putin. And exactly. The question is, how literal do we take it? And I say that because it's my job to follow the facts and not get ahead of it. And yet, how literal do we take it is not only was the request from Ukraine there, and not only is Adam Schiff being threatened with a treason investigation, the only question is if Donald Trump can find someone to do it. But I want to put up on the screen the other context here, which is the FBI director who replaced Comey after being fired for what was reportedly insufficient loyalty. That former acting FBI director is awaiting any decision over whether DOJ is indicting him right here in America. And a judge is pushing back. For your analysis, I want to read this. This is a judge saying the government's going to have to make a call. That's a reference to the Trump administration. If it doesn't, he says, I'm going to start ordering the release of information. In our society, our public has a right to know what's going on. Unusual judicial pushback for a very controversial case where the argument is that Bill Barr's Justice Department is doing what Trump was asking Ukraine to do. What does that all mean? How does that figure into this?
Well, the short form is, are you prosecuting an innocent man for political purposes? And one of the requests to the Justice Department is the question, isn't it a fact that you presented this to a grand jury and they wouldn't indict? Now, that's very unusual, a runaway grand jury. I know of one case in which a senator once went before the grand jury and they did not indict. And there appears to be a similar thing here. And what the judge is saying is, I'm going to release this information because there is no investigation. If you don't, by November the 15th, either form an indictment or not. And if you're not, I'm going to release the information. That's critical. And then we'll have a good idea whether these prosecutors were making crime for political purposes against McCabe.
It is Thursday, the 3rd of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, we had a rather unhinged performance by Donald Trump yesterday. Now, the New York Times called it stormy. Other news outlets said he seemed perturbed. I think unhinged might be an apt description. I don't know why the New York Times does what they do. Stormy. You mean he's paying off porn stars again? I think of all the words in the English language to be using in connection with Donald Trump, stormy might be really low on the list. Please. But they got kids working there because apparently Bat Cat is that kind of an editor. That kind. I don't know what that kind is, but it's, I don't know, in terms of journalistic ethics, some people might call the wrong kind. All right. Well, Hillary has a new book out, and she's been making the rounds, as well she should, at the same time that the New York Times has their reporters shopping their book around, or hawking their book around. From pretty much the New York Times reporter's book is based upon block-busting news stories that they decided to hold back so they could put it in their book and then release their book when it seemed like the sales might be at their greatest. Well, that's one way to do it. Other people might surmise that if a journalist has some breaking news, blockbuster news, we'd like to hear about it sooner rather than when it's convenient for the sales of a book. David Perry says, boycott the book. Don't buy it. I might concur. We can get all that we need to know from the book from the news shows that have them on. Now, Hillary's book is great. I've looked at parts of it. I haven't finished it yet. But it's a book about, well, you know, gutsy women. Barbara Jordan being one. Rachel had a clip of Barbara Jordan's impeachment speech back in the day during Nixon. God, what a time. I remember the days when people spoke in complete sentences with flourish. The good old days. You know, like when education was considered to be a good thing. All right. The only way that authoritarianism works is if you have an uneducated populace. Or, shall we say, low educated. They're his best friends. Indeed. So do we put the onus on Trump? Well, there's still a lot of people who pretty much say he can do anything he wants. Oh, just as another update, as the impeachment machine, well-oiled, as I should say it is, the traitor bots are working quite a bit harder than normal. I mean, they're pushing memes out like there's no tomorrow. How do they have so many at hand? I mentioned yesterday, I'm looking for an appropriate photograph in my library to put up to, complete the meme. And I come back and just one of these traitor bots has posted a dozen, 2 dozen in like just minutes. The idea is to get you to respond to every single one, so by the time you're getting to the other one, you got 3 or 4 or 5, 6, a dozen more. It is a strategy. And if this is a real person or persons, they are dupes, assets, or idiots. Or they could be from another country. There is that too. We have to consider that. In the cases here in Southern Oregon, in different Facebook community pages, a very similar behavior has been occurring. At some point in the day, the sentence structure, syntax, spelling, word order is completely messed up and turned around as if someone completely different is writing the posts. They are working in shifts. There are platoons of them. And they're all pushing this weird 8chan conspiracy theory that Barr is running around the world trying to convince people in other countries to adopt, to give Trump succor because he feels so bad because he thinks he's an illegitimate president unless he can squash this Russian investigation and call it a hoax. The extent in which a Barr would do this, that person should be impeached as well. John Mitchell spent, 18, 19 months in jail, albeit his trial came after he was no longer Attorney General because apparently there was an OLC memo back in the day. I know the OLC didn't exist, but the OLC arose out of Watergate because, damn it, they're going to make sure that never happened again. Unless you can clutch at your pearls and have some sort of prurient sabotage against a sitting president and get him impeached because he's a Democrat and kind of young, so, the first hippie that took over, and they had to make sure that never happened again. And then we got the black guy, and for 8 years, and they said, you elect the black guy, you will be punished. And we have been punished. They warned us, and now we're getting the punishment. But we are Americans. We can only take so much before we say that is enough. Smack me once, shame on you. Smack me twice, shame on you. Smack me 3 times, you're not going to hit me again, mofo. Ballots, not bullets. I keep hearing how Antifa is going to kill people in the streets, and the only call for violent sedition is coming from these traitor bots. Well, amplified from what Trump said. And what was that blockbuster New York Times story that was sat on until the appropriate time when the book sales would go up? An Obama joke, and we mentioned this yesterday, an Obama joke about how far the Republicans would go to get illegals. Build a moat, put some alligators and piranhas in there, and, impale people on stakes or pikes. And Trump because, as I mentioned yesterday, he fantasizes about these things. It has been reported he has Mein Kampf on his bedstand. So the idea that he would fantasize about harming another human being in a very, Don the Impaler sort of way, sounds about right. Knowing how there is not 1 ounce, no, there's not even a subatomic particle of benevolence in that guy. Not even a quark. Okay. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, that was former federal prosecutor John Flannery. And he's pretty much pointing out that the rats are jumping ship from the White House. And, well, they should. On the rest of the menu, the South Carolina GOP is slammed with a lawsuit for canceling its primary to protect Trump. I just love it when Republicans eat themselves. Yeah, it's so fun. Leaked audio from a recent ALEC seminar on gerrymandering exposed an ex-GOP lawmaker bragging about tricking black Democrats with his gerrymandering schemes. Yeah, they're laughing at us because they know they can get away with it. How about we don't let them get away with it anymore? And border officials say, nope, Trump still has not built a foot of new wall in his nearly 3 years in office. Well, as soon as Trump finds out who said that, that person will not be working in government anymore. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where cyber attackers targeted the personal information of students, professors, and employees at one of Australia's most prestigious universities. And the UN Special Rapporteur reported that Saudi Arabia's crown prince is working overtime to dodge blame for the Jamal Khashoggi killing. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. To the leftish of the page at the bottom of that homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will then notice our link to our Patreon page. And all kidding aside, do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Though the bulk of what we fund this little powerhouse of resistance comes out of our own pockets and wallets. Really, you are our biggest contributor, and we would be unable to do this without you. And it is even more dire than before. As you've heard, we're having some issues with the workhorse machines, and we're going to have to get some newish ones, as we did before, halfway through this 8-year tour of resistance. And thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom as well. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and of course, I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. A very integral part to this multimedia operation here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So do check that out. That's where all the source material is. And links to other source materials in which they derived their reportage from. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts, wherever. Okay, before we get into issues here, I just wanted to bring up that yesterday was my son's 42nd birthday, or would have been, but he passed on December 30th, and all these firsts are pretty tough, as one can imagine, and one can probably know if you've gone through something similar in terms of, permanent loss. And thank you for those who reached out and sent their well wishes to me and wishing me well. It was kind of weepy. I didn't think I'd get as weepy, but I did. And I sure miss him. All right, let's get on with this first offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it looks like it comes out of the Associated Press. It came through Share Blue Media, and they're taking up some of the AP's work. But anonymous worker bees, as usual at the AP, bring us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Republican former South Carolina congressman is part of a lawsuit filed on Tuesday over the state party's decision to cancel its GOP primary ahead of the 2020 election, a move taken by several states in erecting hurdles for the long-shot candidates challenging Donald Trump. Former U.S. Representative Bob Inglis said in a lawsuit that the party's decision not to hold a presidential primary deprives him and of other Republicans of the ability to vote for the candidate of their choice in South Carolina's famous and particularly influential First in the South primary. South Carolina is among at least 4 states that have canceled Republican primaries and caucuses next year in an effort that helps smooth Trump's path to re-election. Well, the move taken last month in South Carolina by the state party's executive committee is not unusual for the party of the White House incumbent seeking a second term. Doing so allows Trump to consolidate his support as Democrats work to winnow their large field of candidates. Well, the suit was filed in state court in Columbia on Inglis's behalf by the Protect Democracy Project, which calls itself a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing American democracy from declining into a more authoritarian form of government. In a statement issued by the group, Inglis, who served 6 terms in the House and lost a GOP primary to Trey Gowdy in 2010. Wow. Said he was taking part in the suit because the cancellation of the primary by a small handful of party insiders denied me, he said, and every other South Carolina Republican our voice in defining what the Republican Party is and who it supports. South Carolina's Republican Party said on Tuesday that it does not typically comment on lawsuits. Challengers have emerged to Trump, including former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld, former Illinois Representative Joe Walsh, and Mark Sanford, a former congressman and governor from South Carolina, who usually takes really long walks in the Appalachians. Really long walks. Sanford said that news of the lawsuit would make our founding fathers proud. He later told the AP that it is frustrating not to be able to compete in his home state, and said the political process is made better and stronger by a contrast, comparison, and evaluation and debate. Primary challenges to incumbents are rarely successful, and Trump's poll numbers among Republican voters have proved resilient. Nonetheless, Trump's aides are looking to prevent a repeat of the convention discord that highlighted the electoral weaknesses of Presidents H.W. Bush and Jimmy Carter in their failed re-election campaigns. Since last year, Trump's campaign has worked to monitor and at times control the process by which delegates to next year's Republican National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina are selected. His campaign wants the convention to be a 4-night infomercial for Trump by sidelining the president's detractors within the party. Josh Israel of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro, Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. For years, corporate-funded American Legislative Exchange Council, affectionately known as ALEC, has been the place where right-wing state lawmakers and corporate lobbyists go to conspire in secret. Well, it's also where dimwits who don't know how to legislate can get legislation in a box constructed by ALEC. All you have to do is put your name to the bill that they have drafted for you, among other things. But thanks to Slate, the leaked audio from a recent session on how to get away with gerrymandering has been made public. The presentation was moderated by voter suppression advocate Cleta Mitchell and featured voter fraud conspiracy theorist Hans von Spakovsky, unsuccessful Trump judicial nominee and alleged white supremacist Thomas Farr, former Representative Lynn Westmoreland, Repug of Georgia, and State Representative Phil King, Repug. Their focus was on teaching the 1,413 attendees that gerrymandering is a, quote, political adult blood sport, end quote. And those doing it should pretend to be transparent, but destroy the real evidence of how they devise their maps. Just like a good Republican would. That's why they're referred to as repugs in the Netroots Radio style manual. Mitchell warned that since Republican lawmakers devising maps to overrepresent their share of the population were likely to be sued, they should not keep anything incriminating. My advice to you is, if you don't want it turned over in discovery, you probably ought to get rid of it before you go home, Mitchell said. You mean you are advising people to commit a crime? That's the core of American values. This is the American values that they want to propagate? How dare they? That's not America, and that's no value that anyone would construe as American. Well, on the other hand, how many people sold the Brooklyn Bridge to somebody else overseas and showed a part of the character of America? Yeah, usually those folks are on the fringes, but now they're running the show. Perhaps most shocking were the comments from Westmoreland, who represented Georgia in Congress from 2005 to 2017. Before that, he served as Republican leader in the Georgia House of Representatives, where he opposed gerrymandering by the Democratic majority in 2001. When Westmoreland went to the House of Reps in 2005, he pushed Georgia Republicans, who had regained control of the state legislature in the 2004 election, to ram through a controversial mid-decade redistricting plan. Westmoreland bragged that he expressly tricked Democratic lawmakers in the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus into undermining their own interests. In 2010, he recalled how he co-chaired a GOP gerrymandering effort called Red Map and relied on a map-making computer system. Red Map sounds suspiciously close to redlining. He invited black Democrats in Georgia to try the software to devise perfect districts that packed in the most minority voters possible and left neighboring districts more Republican. Then he would use these racially packed districts in the redistricting. Now, Dan Vicuña, Common Cause's national redistricting manager, said yesterday, Wednesday, that this is about as clear an example as you can have of illegal racial gerrymandering without having a court trial. See, this is the thing. If they just put it right out in public, say, hey, I just called you an N-word, so therefore it's okay. I didn't try to hide it. Noting that the Supreme Court has repeatedly held that race-based gerrymanders like the ones Westmoreland described are unconstitutional, violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment as well as Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, he observed that Westmoreland effectively admitted to illegal activity. You've got clear admission by a Republican leader of conspiring with sitting legislators to pack black voters in as few districts as possible to ensure white dominance in the rest of the state, he said. If that's not illegal racial gerrymandering, I don't know what is. Also brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, of course, Josh Israel is out of Share Blue Media. Customs and Border Protection officials admitted this week that despite Trump's claims, not a single new mile of border wall has been built in Trump's nearly 3 years in office. Trump has repeatedly suggested he has kept his signature campaign promise, a massive wall along the entire U.S.-Mexico border, funded entirely by Mexico. As recently as Wednesday, he claimed that massive sections were going up rapidly. That claim is totally debunked by a document provided to Newsweek this week by Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In a border wall status update, the two agencies noted that as of September 30th, 2019, approximately 69 miles of new border wall system had been constructed in place of dilapidated and outdated designs. It seems like walls don't last. Who knew? They noted that they expect to have completed only part of the first 509-mile section by the end of 2020, undermining Trump's promise that the wall will be completed with his first term. Look upon my works, I am Ozymandias. Trump made his border wall pledge for the first time at his June 2015 campaign kickoff, and he said that Mexico's going to pay for it. The U.S.-Mexico border is more than 1,900 miles long. After initially promising to build a wall along that entire length, Trump later suggested it could be just about half that, maybe. I want my wall. Trump also notably told Fox News in April of 2016 that the wall would be complete within 2 years from the time we start. Days later, he told supporters, if there's ever a second term, you'll say, man, he got that wall built fast. We're going to put him up. In August of 2016, Trump repeated the promise, adding, one day we will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall. Yikes. When Mexico made it clear that it had no intentions of spending billions on Trump's wall, Trump tried to get Congress to send the bill to the American people. And when even the GOP-controlled legislature balked, Trump began to simply pretend that the wall was already being built. Meanwhile, the administration was instead busy replacing and renovating a few dozen miles worth of existing border fencing. Trump didn't let this stop him from claiming that the new wall was ahead of schedule. A few months ago, Trump declared a national emergency and announced that he would simply raid existing Defense Department funds to pay for parts of his wall. Wow. That almost seems like an abuse of power, doesn't it? Well, we better get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farsan. Insects can be noisy, but most of the sounds they produce, we can't hear. Take tiny insects called tree hoppers. They communicate through vibrations. When a male tree hopper is hunting for a mate, he vibrates his body to produce a special love song.
They sound like, ooh, boop, 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 boop.
Casey Fowler Finn is an assistant professor of biology at St. Louis University. She says if a female tree hopper is interested, she'll vibrate back to the male, basically her way of saying, hey there. Fowler Finn wondered if tree hopper mating songs might change at different temperatures, which could affect whether the species survives as the climate changes. So she and grad student Doan Hoxson built custom incubators using plywood and IKEA shelves, plus a special laser that helps them listen to tree hoppers.
The laser receives information about these tiny vibrations on the plant stem, which we then amplify and process into sounds that we can hear.
Turns out the tree hoppers do sound different when the temperature changes. Here's a male singing at 65 degrees. And another at 97 degrees. But that's not all. The team recorded these songs and played them for females to see if they still found them attractive.
So essentially we're having a conversation with the insect because we can play back a bunch of different signals to females and ask her how much she likes each one.
As male treehopper love songs changed across temperatures, females still recognized them, saying, yep, I'm interested in mating with you. Hoxson says that was exciting.
I think when we saw that, we were just like, wow, this is awesome.
The study appeared in the Journal of Evolutionary Biology. She says this is just one piece of the puzzle, but it gives her some hope that tree hoppers and other similar insect species will keep things steamy, even as the climate warms. For Scientific American 60-Second Science, I'm Shayla Farsan.
But Mom!
Don't but Mom me. You heard what the doctor said.
I'm fine. I just got my bell rung. It's not like I blacked out.
You've had headaches, dizzy spells, and you're just not yourself. That's not feeling fine.
Come on, I can't miss the game.
It's still serious, even if you didn't black out. It's better to miss one game than the whole season.
All concussions are serious. Know the warning signs and never let your child return to play before a healthcare professional says it's okay. A message from CDC.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
A new level of despair has spread among tens of thousands of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border who have been seeking refuge, in legal terms asylum, in the United States. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that's the beginning of a recent Associated Press report which goes on to explain the reason. Quote, "The Trump administration has begun enforcing radical new restrictions on who qualifies for asylum," end quote, and who doesn't. And who doesn't is any refugee who has passed through a third country while fleeing for their lives on their way to the U.S. border, who hasn't applied for and been denied asylum in that country, which is to say, as a practical matter, that no refugee from Central America need apply for asylum. Let's return to the AP article. Quote, "The United States is the only option," said Dunia Romero, a 31-year-old Honduran, who had tears in her eyes as she spoke at a shelter in Tijuana. She said she packed her bags and fled her homeland with her two boys, ages 7 and 11, after learning that her abusive ex-husband, a powerful gang leader, was going to have her killed. Under this administration's rule, this woman and her children cannot even be considered for asylum, at least not unless and until the Supreme Court strikes down the Trump administration's rule as violative of either national or international law. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the United Packing House Workers of America was chartered under the CIO. The new union was the result of the CIO's Packing House Workers Organizing Committee. Started in 1937, the Organizing Committee was an effort to build a union that broke down barriers between race and crafts in the meat packing industry. Chicago was at the heart of this effort. Workers in the meatpacking industry faced grueling, often unsafe working conditions. The stockyards in Chicago had seen the failure of two major strikes. The first was in 1904, the second in 1921. Racial and ethnic divisions had plagued both of those strikes. The organizing committee made inclusion the heart of its efforts. It also reached out into the communities. This broad approach to organizing that has come to be known as social unionism. This approach recognizes that workers face issues that go far beyond the shop floor. The efforts paid off with the founding of the new union, with its headquarters located in Chicago. They won a major strike in 1946. The union became one of the most progressive in the nation. The United Packing House Workers of America was one of the earliest unions to back the fledgling civil rights movement. Union leaders supported Dr. Martin Luther King and the Montgomery bus boycott. In 1956, they invited Dr. King to Chicago to share what was happening in Alabama. One of the organizers of the United Packing House Workers of America was a man named Les O'Rear. Les went on to live to be 103 years old. He was one of the founders of the Illinois Labor History Society, which helps bring you these Labor History in 2 segments. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on October 3rd, 2019. I'm Mark Belanger.
Don't believe the corporate lies.
That is Robert Reich, a professor of public policy at the University of California, Berkeley. He was the U.S. Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton. He describes the lies corporations use to denigrate unions and stop unionization drives.
Wealthy corporations and their enablers have spread 5 big lies about unions in order to stop workers from organizing and to protect their own bottom lines. Know the truth. Lie number 1, labor unions are bad for workers. Wrong. Unions are good for all workers, even those who aren't unionized. In the mid-1950s, when 1/3 of all workers in the United States were unionized, wages grew in tandem with the economy. That's because workers across America, even those who were not unionized, had significant power to demand and get better wages, hours, benefits, and working conditions. Since then, as union membership has declined, the middle class has shrunk as well. Lie number 2, unions hurt the economy. Wrong. When workers are unionized, they can negotiate better wages, which in turn spreads the economic gains more evenly and strengthens the middle class. This creates a virtuous cycle. Wages increase, workers have more to spend in their communities, businesses thrive, and the economy grows. Since the 1970s, the decline in unionization accounts for 1/3 of the increase in income inequality. Without unions, wealth becomes concentrated at the top, and the gains don't trickle down to workers. Lie number 3, labor unions are as powerful as big business. Wrong. Labor union membership in 2018 accounted for 10.5% of the American workforce, while large corporations account for almost 3/4 of the entire American economy. And when it comes to political power, it's big business and small labor. In the 2018 midterms, labor unions contributed less than $70 million to parties and candidates, while big corporations and their political action committees contributed $1.6 billion. This enormous gulf between business and labor is a huge problem. It explains why most economic gains have been going to executives and shareholders rather than workers. But this doesn't have to be the case. Lie number 4. Most unionized workers are in industries like steel and auto manufacturing. Wrong again. Although industrial unions are still vitally important to workers, the largest part of the unionized workforce is workers in the professional and service sectors, retail, restaurant, hotel, hospital, teachers, which comprise 59% of all workers represented by a union. And these workers benefit from being in a union. In 2018, unionized service workers earned a median wage of $802 a week. Non-unionized service workers made an average $261 less. That's almost a third less. Lie number 5. Most unionized workers are white, male, and middle-aged. Some unionized workers are, of course, but most newly unionized workers are not. They're women. They're young, and a growing portion are black and brown. In fact, it's through the power of unions that people who had been historically marginalized in the American economy because of their race, ethnicity, or gender are now gaining economic ground. In 2018, women who were in unions earned 21% more than non-unionized women. And African Americans who were unionized earned nearly 20% more than African Americans who were non-unionized. Don't believe the corporate lies. Today's unions are growing, expanding, and boosting the wages and economic prospects of those who need them most. They're good for workers.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 56 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of 60 to 62, they say. Supposed to be somewhat dry, but we have rain at this very moment. So there. It looks like pockets of it are spread out all across the region. And that's good. I like that it seems to be hovering where the mothership is. Winds are light and variable out of it looks like the southwest. And we will have cloudy conditions throughout the day. They say a low percentage of rain, but that's because apparently where this weather station, personal weather station, up on Mount Baldy area, yes, Old Mount Baldy, Old Baldy, actually is what it's called, not Mount Baldy, Old Baldy. It seems to be maybe a bit drier and cooler there even. But here at the mothership, our weather station predicts a mix of clouds and sun, partly cloudy tomorrow, with a 20% chance of rain, and we looks like we have 100% chance of rain because it is lightening up and is now just a drizzle. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow, highs in the mid-60s, winds will remain light and variable. Overnight lows in the low 50s. Barometric pressure is holding steady locally here at 30.09 inches. Visibility is at 5 miles. And relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Do it on one breath. Just try. London is 58 and cloudy. Paris is 58 and sunny. Rome is 68 and fair. Kiev is 75 and fair. Kabul is 62 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 82 and fair. Tokyo is 78 and mostly cloudy, and it looks like they have a typhoon warning. What? Sydney, Australia is 65 and clear. San Francisco, California is 52 and sunny. And New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy in the fall. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Colin Packham of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Cyber attackers spent months targeting the personal information of students, professors, and employees at one of Australia's most prestigious universities. A report into a 2018 breach released on Wednesday yesterday said, although the identities of the culprits remain unknown, the Australian National University, affectionately known there as ANU, said in June that attackers had managed to breach its cyber defenses in late 2018, potentially gaining access to sensitive data that included students' bank account numbers and passport details going back 19 years. ANU is one of Australia's highest-ranked universities, with alumni including former and current members of the country's government, stoking fears that the attackers had been looking for potential leverage against high-ranking individuals. Gee, I wonder who might be in cahoots to do that. Heightening those concerns, an assessment conducted by U.S. defense contractor Northrop Grumman concluded the attackers ignored typical targets such as academic research to go after the personal information of students, current and former employees, which includes professors, by the way. In addition to their efficiency and precision, the attackers demonstrated an exceptional degree of operational security that left few traces of their activities, the report said. ANU Vice Chancellor Professor Brian Schmidt told Reuters there was no evidence on who the attackers were, while the investigators now believe the attackers obtained less than 1% of the 200,000 records kept on the server, and the data has not yet been released on the dark web. They do know which records were compromised. This was not a smash and grab. It was a diamond heist, Professor Schmidt said. It was an extremely sophisticated operation, most likely carried out by a team of between 5 to 15 people working around the clock. The ANU breach came amid a spate of cyber attacks, including one against Australia's parliament and the 3 largest political parties, and that Reuters reported was attributed to China. By local intelligence, China has denied responsibility for the attacks because, of course, they would. But Canberra is worried about cyber attacks, particularly attempts on Australian universities. Many Australian universities remain financially dependent on foreign students. They are worth about $23.45 billion US a year to the Australian economy, with Chinese students accounting for about a third of that figure. The Northrop report said the attack on ANU began with a spear phishing email on November 9th of 2019 to a senior staff member. The attackers had imminent access to university records for about 3 weeks before being cut off in December.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Stephanie Nebahay of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Saudi Arabia's crown prince is trying to repair damage to his image done by Jamal Khashoggi's death, or murder, by insisting layers and layers of hierarchy separated him from the Saudi agents who killed the journalist, the UN investigator told Reuters. Mohammed bin Salman told the CBS program 60 Minutes that as de facto Saudi leader, he ultimately bore the full responsibility for the killing a year ago. But he denied ordering it. He made similar remarks to the U.S. broadcaster PBS. Asked how he did not know about the killing by Saudi officials, he told CBS it was impossible for him to know what 3 million people working for the Saudi government do daily. In an interview with Reuters, Agnes Calamard, UN expert on summary executions, attributed his remarks to a strategy of rehabilitation in the face of public outrage around the world. He is creating a distance between himself. He is exonerating himself from direct criminal responsibility in the killing. He is creating layers and layers and layers of actors and institutions which are protecting him from his direct accountability for the killing. Sounds like a familiar strategy now, doesn't it? Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.